The hum of jazz filled the air like smoke, soft and lazy, wrapping itself around the bar's dim lights and half-empty glasses. The velvet hour was almost closing. A few strangers lingered in their booths, clinging to the last drops of their drinks and their own stories. Behind the counter, Lena Carter wiped down the same spot for the 5th time, pretending not to feel the weight of eyes following her. Miles Dean, the bar manager, leaned against the wall near the restroom sign, his smile too wide, his stare too heavy. He had been watching her all night, his words earlier still echoing in her ears. "You want to keep your job, don't you, Lena?" The smell of whiskey clung to his breath like threat. She nodded once, then buried herself in cleaning glasses, hoping silence would make her invisible. But silence never saved anyone here. In the farthest booth near the corner, a man sat alone, half hidden by the flicker of a dying neon sign. Ethan Varela stirred the ice in his glass, the sound faint but sharp against the music. His dark coat hung loosely on his shoulders, his shirt sleeves rolled up, the look of someone who didn't belong here and didn't care to explain why. He had been coming to this place for 3 nights in a row, always at the same hour, always to watch. He told himself it was part of the inspection part of the undercover evaluation he needed to conduct on his own company's bar chain. But tonight, something felt different, like the air itself knew what was coming. The song changed to something slower, the saxophone melting into melancholy. That was when Miles spoke again, his voice slicing through the dim light. "Lena, come here for a second. We need to talk in private." She hesitated near the counter, glancing toward Hazel, the bartender, who gave her a small shake of the head. But Miles was already moving. He smiled the way predators smile before striking, and before Lena could protest, his hand gripped her wrist. It was not a violent pull, not yet, but firm enough to silence her. The sound of a glass falling echoed as Hazel froze mid-motion. Lena's breath caught as Miles dragged her toward the back hallway, past the empty tables and the flickering light that hummed like a warning. And then it came, that sound, the soft mechanical click of the restroom door locking. No one noticed when Miles locked the restroom door except the man in the corner booth. Ethan's gaze snapped up from his untouched drink, his expression unreadable at first, then slowly sharpening into something colder than the whiskey before him. He set the glass down, straightened his jacket, and listened. Inside the restroom, muffled voices rose and fell, one pleading, one low and insistent. Ethan's hand slipped into his pocket, pulling out his phone. He pressed record without thinking, a habit drilled from years of corporate damage control. His eyes never left the door. Lena's reflection trembled in the mirror above the sink. Miles stood too close, his shadow swallowing hers. She could smell the alcohol on his breath, the staleness of smoke and arrogance. "I said we should talk," he murmured, his voice low. She stepped back, hitting the wall. "Please, Mr. Dean, I just want to go home. You owe me 5 minutes." He said, his tone turning sharp. One hand braced against the wall beside her head. She tried to slip past him, but his other hand caught her elbow. Her heart hammered so loud it drowned the music outside. Somewhere beyond that door, life went on. Glasses clinked, laughter faded. But not for her. In the booth, Ethan rose quietly, his chair sliding back against the floor with a muted scrape. He glanced toward Hazel, who stared back with wide eyes. In a low voice, he said, "Call the police. Tell them there's a manager assaulting a staff member. Do it now." Hazel hesitated. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. He was already moving. Each step toward that hallway sounded heavier than the music itself. The restroom door rattled once, then again. Miles turned just as Ethan's voice came through the wood, cold and precise. "Open it." Miles scoffed. "Who the hell are you?" Ethan didn't repeat himself. The handle twisted, and the door burst open with a force that silenced the bar. The next few seconds felt like slow motion. Miles's hand dropped from Lena's arm. She stumbled back toward the sink, breathless. Ethan's gaze locked on Miles, his calm terrifying. "Step away from her." Miles sneered. "She's fine. We were just talking." His words dripped with mock innocence. Ethan's eyes flicked to Lena, who was trembling, her lipstick smudged where she had bitten her lip to keep from crying. "Is that true?" he asked her softly. She shook her head once, barely breathing. That was enough. Ethan turned back to Miles. "I want you to step outside, now." Miles laughed. "You don't tell me what to do here, stranger. You're in my bar." Ethan's voice didn't rise, but the weight of it filled the room. "Correction," he said. "It's my bar." The words landed like a gunshot. Miles blinked confusion, flickering across his face. "What the hell are you talking about?" Ethan pulled out his wallet and placed his corporate ID on the counter beside the sink. Ethan Varela, CEO Varela Holdings. His tone stayed calm, but his jaw was tight. "And you're done here." Within minutes, the sirens cut through the night. Blue and red lights painted the bar's glass walls as police officers walked in. Hazel stood by the counter giving her statement. Lena sat on a chair near the corner, wrapped in a jacket that wasn't hers. Ethan stood nearby, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He didn't speak when the officers led Miles out in handcuffs, nor when the whispers started around the room. Only when the last of them left did he step closer to Lena. She tried to stand, but he shook his head gently. "Stay seated. You're safe now." She looked up at him, confusion and fear and shame mixing in her eyes. "You shouldn't have had to go through that," he said quietly. She tried to speak, but only managed a broken apology. He stopped her with a shake of the head. "Don't apologize. You didn't do anything wrong." Outside, the rain had begun to fall, tapping softly against the glass. Ethan looked toward the streetlights beyond the window, their glow blurred by raindrops. For a brief second, his reflection overlapped with hers. In the glass, two strangers bound by a moment neither of them had asked for. The jazz had stopped. The night had changed. The door that shouldn't have closed had opened something else entirely. The rain outside turned heavier, a slow percussion against the glass, as blue and red lights faded into the distance. Inside the bar, silence settled thick as smoke. Ethan remained standing by the door long after the officers left, watching Lena as she tried to steady her hands around a paper cup of water Hazel had given her. The cup trembled, tiny ripples spreading across the surface. She kept apologizing to no one in particular, her voice a whisper, her eyes distant. Ethan didn't speak. He simply pulled a chair closer and sat across from her, his coat still damp from the drizzle. He knew the script of trauma all too well. He had seen it before, years ago, in another place. Another woman who hadn't been believed. The memory came back in flashes, the fluorescent lights of a diner. His mother's face pale under the cruel laughter of her boss, the way young Ethan had wanted to fight but hadn't known how. That helplessness had followed him into adulthood, shaping every decision, every disguise. Night had been different. Tonight he had finally acted. Lena's voice broke the quiet. "I didn't want to make trouble," she said, staring at her hands. "He said if I talked, I'd lose my job." Ethan's reply was calm but sharp. "You didn't make trouble." He did. She looked up then, meeting his eyes for the first time. There was something strange about him. He didn't carry himself like an ordinary customer. He had the stillness of someone used to being obeyed. Yet there was kindness in that stillness. She wanted to ask who he really was, but the exhaustion pressing against her ribs was too heavy. He saw the question anyway. "Go home," he said softly. "Hazel will call a cab. Don't go alone." He stood and walked toward the door without waiting for thanks. The cold air outside hit him like a reckoning. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Security headquarters. Mr. Varela, the voice on the other end, began. "We received the report. Should we notify corporate?" Ethan's answer came low and steady. "No, not yet." He looked up at the glowing sign of the Velvet Hour, its pink letters flickering against the rain. "I need to know how deep this rot goes before the board does." When the cab carrying Lena pulled away, he followed it at a distance until he saw her apartment lights come on. Only then did he drive home. The city at 2 a.m. looked washed out, a smear of neon and wet pavement, its beauty, equal parts loneliness and disguise. In his penthouse, Ethan poured himself another drink, but didn't touch it. He turned on his laptop instead. Dozens of HR complaints blinked across the screen, most marked as resolved or dismissed. The pattern was clear: incidents covered witnesses, silenced turnover, disguised as promotions. It was his company, his brand, his responsibility. He had been too far removed to see it until now. The next morning, sunlight crept through the blinds, harsh and unkind. Ethan sat at his desk scrolling through messages from the corporate board, demanding explanations about last night's police involvement. He ignored them. Instead, he drafted a private memo to himself. Phase 1 complete. Evidence secured. Victim safe. Next step: internal review without alerting HR chain. He leaned back, rubbing his eyes. The face of the waitress lingered behind his lids, the fear, the shame, the quiet strength that refused to vanish. He didn't even know her name yet, and somehow that felt wrong. At noon, he returned to the Velvet Hour. Hazel was cleaning behind the bar, her movements brisk and guarded. She froze when she saw him. "You came back," she said warily. Ethan nodded. "How's she shaken?" Hazel replied. "Didn't sleep, but she'll be okay, I think." He handed her a card. "If she needs a lawyer or therapy, tell her to call this number. The costs covered." Hazel frowned at the name embossed in silver. Varela Holdings Legal Office. She read aloud, eyes narrowing. "Wait, you," Ethan interrupted gently. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell anyone yet." Hazel studied him a moment longer, then nodded. "You're not like the rest of them, are you?" He gave a small, tired smile. "I wish that were true." He walked to the corner booth he had sat in the night before. The chair was still slightly askew. From there, the entire bar stretched before him, like a stage that had forgotten its play. The staff moved quietly, their laughter missing. The usual hum of flirtation and music felt replaced by something colder: awareness. That evening, Lena returned to pick up her final paycheck. Her posture was different now, shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying invisible weight. When she saw Ethan at the booth, she hesitated. "You again," she murmured. He stood adjusting his coat. "I wanted to make sure they treated you fairly." "They didn't," she said, her tone flat. "They told me I could take the rest of the week off. No pay." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not acceptable." "It doesn't matter," she said quickly. "I'll find something else." He could hear the tremor under her calm. For a second, he considered revealing who he was using the authority of his name to fix this instantly. But he stopped himself. Trust couldn't be bought or commanded. It had to be earned quietly. "I'm sorry," he said instead, "for everything that happened here." She looked at him strangely, as if wondering why a stranger would apologize for another man's cruelty. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said softly. He almost smiled at the irony. "Maybe not tonight," he murmured. "But somewhere along the line, I let men like him exist in my company." Her brow furrowed. "Your company?" Ethan caught himself the slip, subtle but irreversible. "It's complicated," he said quickly, changing the subject. "Would you mind if I walked you out?" She hesitated again, then nodded. Outside, the air smelled of wet asphalt and rain-soaked jasmine. They stopped near the curb where her old car waited. She turned to him. "You never told me your name." He looked at her for a long moment. "Ethan," he said. "Just Ethan." "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered. Then she got in and drove away, her taillights vanishing into the blur of Los Angeles dusk. He stood there for a long time, rain beginning again, his reflection pooling beneath the street lamp like a secret he hadn't decided to tell. In the distance, thunder rolled faintly across the horizon, the sound of something coming undone. He knew the investigation was only beginning, but what he didn't know, what he couldn't yet admit, was that it wasn't just his company he was about to uncover. It was himself. The following evening, the velvet hour returned to its usual rhythm of music and murmurs. But something invisible had shifted beneath the low light and polished surfaces. The staff moved carefully now, glancing toward the corner booth that had become a quiet roomer. Lena stood behind the bar again, her apron neatly tied, though her hands betrayed a faint tremor. The manager was gone arrested, but fear had a way of staying even when danger left. When the door opened and Ethan walked in, the air seemed to hold its breath. He no longer wore the anonymity of a stranger. His eyes searched until they found her. For a heartbeat she froze, then forced herself to smile politely, like she would for any customer. He ordered nothing. Instead, he sat at the same booth, his gaze following her movements, not possessively, but with a strange mixture of guilt and vigilance. He watched the way she forced laughter for customers, the way her shoulders tensed each time a man spoke too close. When she finally approached his table to collect empty glasses, their eyes met. "You came back," she said softly. He nodded. "I wanted to make sure you did too." Her lips parted, but no words came. He noticed the faint bruise near her wrist where Miles's hand had been. He wanted to look away but couldn't. She placed a napkin down a small nervous habit as if needing something between them. "I heard they fired half the staff," she said. "People said the company's going to close this place." Maybe he answered, "But some places deserve to start over." She tilted her head slightly. "You sound like you own the world." "No," he said quietly, "just trying to fix a piece of it." He reached into his pocket and set something on the table, a folded handkerchief. She recognized it instantly. "You dropped it last night," he said. "I thought you might want it back." When her fingers brushed his, as she took it, time thinned between them. The contact was brief, but enough to send warmth through the chill that had settled in her bones. She pulled her hand away quickly, cheeks coloring. "Thank you," she murmured. "You don't have to thank me," he said, his voice low. "Just keep your head up." The phrase lingered like a promise. As she turned to walk away, she glanced back once, catching him watching her with a look she couldn't name. Later that night, when the crowd thinned, Ethan remained the last customer. Hazel wiped the counter, whispering to Lena, "That guy gives me CEO vibes." Lena laughed softly. "You think everyone in a suit is a CEO." "Maybe," Hazel said, "but he's different. He looks like someone who lost something important." Lena looked across the room. Ethan sat with his phone untouched, his focus entirely on the quiet chaos of the bar. He looked, she thought, like a man carrying a secret too heavy to put down. When her shift ended, she stepped outside, the air cool and damp with the memory of rain. She was halfway to her car when she heard his voice. "You shouldn't walk alone this late." She turned, startled. Ethan stood under the awning, hands in his pockets. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "There are cameras everywhere." "Cameras don't care," he replied. She hesitated, then shrugged. "Then you can walk me to my car if it makes you feel better." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "It will." They walked in silence down the wet pavement, their footsteps echoing softly. The streetlight flickered overhead, painting her face in alternating shadows and light. "Did you always work in bars?" he asked. "No," she said. "I studied painting, didn't finish. Bills got in the way." "Art doesn't pay until you're dead," he said, half smiling. "That's what my teacher used to say." "Smart teacher," he murmured. "Not really," she said. "He ran away with a student." He laughed quietly, and the sound surprised both of them. It had been a long time since laughter felt easy. At her car door, she turned to face him. "You really don't have to worry about me." "It's not worry," he said. "Just awareness." She frowned softly. "You talk like someone who's always watching." His eyes met hers. "Maybe that's because I've seen what happens when no one does." The silence between them stretched thick with something unspoken. Then she smiled faintly. "Well, thank you for watching." He nodded once, stepping back. "Get some rest, Lena." The way he said her name made her chest tighten. As she drove away, he stood there until her taillights disappeared again into the city. He didn't realize Hazel was watching from the doorway. She called out, "You really are planning something, aren't you?" Ethan looked over his shoulder. "Just making sure justice isn't another empty slogan." He left before she could reply. The next day, the corporate crisis team met in a sleek glass building downtown. Reports of the Velvet Hour incident had reached the press. Ethan sat at the head of the table, expression calm but voice measured. "Our priority is safety," he said. "We will audit every branch. Anyone complicit terminated immediately." A senior director cleared his throat. "Sir, with respect, publicizing this could hurt the brand." Ethan leaned forward. "You think silence doesn't—" The room fell quiet. His assistant handed him a file. "The waitress from last night, Lena Carter. She's being harassed online. Comments are brutal." Ethan scanned the printed screenshots, his stomach tightening at the cruelty of strangers dissecting a woman they'd never met. "Get our PR team to clean it up," he said. "And make sure she doesn't lose her job." Technically, the assistant said carefully, she already quit this morning. He closed the file slowly. The image of her walking away through rain replayed in his mind. Find out where she went. That night he returned to the Velvet Hour once more, but her absence filled every corner. The bar felt hollow, stripped of its purpose. Hazel approached, sliding a napkin toward him. On it, a few words in Lena's handwriting. "Thank you for standing up when no one else did." He read it twice before folding it carefully into his pocket. The jazz played on gentle and distant as he sat alone, a quiet protector in a world that rarely rewarded kindness. For the first time in years, Ethan Varela felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Since that night at the diner when he was a boy, Hope. Weeks passed like shifting light across glass. The Velvet Hour reopened under new management, quieter now stripped of its noise and arrogance. Lena had found work at a smaller cafe downtown, where morning sun replaced neon and the air smelled of espresso instead of gin. She liked the stillness, the absence of stares, the simplicity of people who said please and thank you. Yet some nights when rain tapped softly on her window, she caught herself thinking about the man with the steady voice who had walked her to her car. She tried to forget the look in his eyes, but memory had a way of blooming where it wasn't wanted. One afternoon, as she was wiping tables, a familiar figure appeared at the counter. Ethan stood there, no suit this time, just a gray sweater and jeans, looking almost ordinary. The sight of him made her breath hitch. "You," she said, half smiling, half nervous. "You found me. I was just looking for coffee." He replied, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "I didn't expect to find the best waitress in Los Angeles." She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. "You're not supposed to flatter me. I'm off duty." "Then I'll compliment your cafe instead," he said. "It feels honest." His gaze wandered over the sunlight, spilling across the wooden floor. "Maybe that's what we both needed." She poured him coffee, careful not to meet his eyes for too long. "You're different when you're not saving people," she teased quietly. "Less intimidating." He raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't saving anyone. I just didn't want to repeat my mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" she asked, leaning slightly forward. He hesitated, the words caught somewhere between confession and restraint. "The kind where silence cost someone I loved their life." The sentence landed heavy in the air, and she didn't ask more. Instead, she sat across from him during her break. They talked about small things, the taste of burnt coffee, the smell of rain, her art school days. When he asked about her paintings, she shrugged. "I still paint sometimes," she said. "Nothing serious, just colors, trying to make sense of feelings." "If you could paint anything without fear," he said, repeating the question, like a ritual, what would it be? She thought for a long time, her eyes drifting to the window, where rain had begun to fall again. "A man who saw me without wanting something." The words came out quietly, like a secret she hadn't meant to share. Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "And what would you name it?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe the distance between kindness and love." He nodded slowly. "That's a dangerous distance." "Maybe," she said, "but it's the only one I trust." Their eyes met, and for a moment the cafe disappeared. It was just the sound of rain, the warmth of light, and two people learning the shape of silence together. Later that evening, Ethan walked her to the bus stop. They stood beneath a shared umbrella, close enough to feel the warmth of each other's breath, but not close enough to touch. "You never told me what you do," she said finally. "You keep showing up like some kind of mystery." "Would it matter?" he asked. "Maybe not," she admitted. "But it might help me decide if I should be nervous or grateful." He smiled faintly. "Then let's say I'm someone trying to be better at both." A bus arrived, its headlights cutting through the rain. She turned to him. "You could just say you're lonely," she said softly. He looked at her, something fragile flickering in his eyes. "Maybe I am." The words hung between them, vulnerable and real. She stepped onto the bus, their fingers brushing for a fleeting second. It was an accidental touch, soft, electric enough to pull her heartbeat into chaos. She found a seat by the window and watched him through the glass as the bus pulled away. He stood there, rain darkening his hair, watching until she disappeared into the city's blur. That night, Ethan returned to his penthouse and stared out at the skyline. The world of glass and steel below him looked clean, perfect, indifferent. He thought of Lena's voice, the tremor in her laugh, the defiance in her silence. Somewhere in that fragility was the strength he'd forgotten people could have. He reached for his phone, opened his company's internal audit reports, and began writing a directive for a new policy anonymous protection program. 0 tolerance for harassment. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. Across town, Lena sat in her small apartment, her damp hair wrapped in a towel, her sketchbook open on her lap. She began to draw without thinking, lines becoming shapes, shapes becoming faces. The man she drew had tired eyes and a half smile that looked like regret and hope blended together. She stopped when she realized it was him. She closed the sketchbook and whispered to herself, "Stop painting ghosts," but she couldn't. In the following days, Ethan returned to the cafe, always at the same hour, always sitting by the same window. They never called it anything, whatever was happening between them, but the air around them grew softer, more certain. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. Once she reached across the table to adjust the cuff of his sleeve, and he stilled completely, his breath catching as her fingers brushed his wrist. It lasted less than a second, yet something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that neither was ready to name. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "Sometimes silence isn't weakness," he said. "It's restraint." She looked up, her eyes catching the reflection of the rain outside. "Then maybe we're both stronger than we look." He smiled, the kind of smile that didn't need words. The rain continued to fall steady, and forgiving like the world itself had decided to listen for once. The storm that rolled in that evening felt different, darker, as if the city itself had caught wind of the lie waiting to surface. Lena had just closed the cafe when her phone buzzed with a message from Hazel. "You need to see this," it said, followed by a link. She hesitated before tapping it. The headline flashed in bold across the screen: Billionaire CEO Ethan Varela accused of silencing victims in corporate scandal. Her heart froze. The picture below showed him in a black suit walking out of a courthouse. Years ago, his expression unreadable. Cameras flashing like judgment. The article painted him as the kind of man who fixed everything with money, who paid off settlements to hide ugly truths. Lena's hands trembled. She read every line, every accusation, every sentence that stripped him of the man she thought she knew. The rain outside turned into a roar drumming against the window, as if demanding she choose what to believe. When her phone rang, his name appeared on the screen. She stared at it until it stopped ringing. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the cafe, like always unaware of the storm waiting for him inside. Lena greeted him with a calm that felt rehearsed. He noticed it immediately, the way her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Rough night?" he asked gently. "You could say that," she replied. She poured his coffee, but didn't sit with him. The silence between them felt colder than the rain. After a moment, she spoke. "You never told me what you do." He looked up, sensing the edge in her tone. "I thought it didn't matter." "It didn't," she said, "until I saw your face on a headline." His jaw tightened. "You read it?" "I did," she said flatly. "Tell me it's not true." He took a slow breath. "It's not what it looks like. That's what everyone says, right before it turns out to be exactly what it looks like." He leaned forward, his voice low, steady. "I didn't silence anyone, Lena. I paid a settlement to protect a victim from being destroyed by the press. She didn't want a trial. She wanted peace. I gave her that. She stared at him, disbelief shadowing her features. So you saved her with money? You think that's what justice looks like? No, he said quietly. I think that's what mercy looks like when the system fails. She turned away, the sound of the rain filling the space where her trust used to be. You protect everyone but yourself, she said softly. Maybe because you don't believe you deserve to be saved. The words hit harder than she intended. He didn't speak for a long time, just looked at her with something raw flickering in his eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. You sound like someone who's been saving people her whole life. I'm not, she said. I just know what it's like to believe in someone who turns out to be another version of the same man. He stood slowly, leaving cash on the counter, though she hadn't charged him. You shouldn't believe everything you read, he said. And you shouldn't hide behind what you think is noble, she replied. He looked at her one last time, rain streaking across the glass behind him. If you ever find the truth, I hope it's still me. Then he left. The door closed softly, but the echo stayed long after he was gone. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She kept replaying their conversations, his steady voice, the sincerity that felt too real to fake. But the article gnawed at her, feeding every scar left by men who had once promised kindness. By morning, the cafe owner handed her a folded newspaper. Your boyfriend made the front page again, he joked. She forced a smile, took the paper, and hid it beneath the counter. She couldn't bear to look. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his office, surrounded by board members demanding explanations. The media is tearing us apart, one of them said. We can't afford another scandal. Ethan's patience thinned. We can't afford to ignore what actually matters either. Are you protecting that waitress? Another asked, tone sharp. Be careful, Ethan. People will start talking. He rose from his seat, his voice quiet but dangerous. Let them. When the meeting ended, he found himself staring out the window at the rain that refused to stop. For the first time, he understood how easily truth could drown in noise. That evening, he returned to the cafe, though he knew she wouldn't want to see him. She was wiping down tables when he entered. We're closed, she said without looking up. Then let me say one thing, and I'll leave. She sighed, setting down the cloth. You said that once already. I mean it this time. He took a step closer, but not enough to invade her space. The woman from the article, her name was Clara. She was one of my employees. I did what I could to help her disappear before the tabloids destroyed her life. I never paid her to stay quiet. I paid so she could start over. Lena's throat tightened, and now she's gone. She moved to another country, he said. She sends postcards every year. That's the truth. How do I know you're not lying to me now? She asked. You don't, he said simply. You'll have to decide what kind of man you believe me to be. She stared at him for a long moment, searching for deceit in his face, and finding only exhaustion. I can't, she whispered. Not right now. He nodded, the acceptance in his eyes more painful than anger. Then I'll stop asking. He left without another word. Outside, the rain had turned to mist, soft but endless. Inside, Lena stood motionless, her hand pressed against the counter, where his warmth still lingered. She told herself it was better this way, distance was safer than faith. But deep down, a quieter voice whispered that maybe she had just lost something she didn't know she needed. Across town, Ethan drove through the sleepless city headlights. Cutting through the rain, like questions without answers. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of their distance. The space where love would learn to survive in silence. The storm over Los Angeles did not wait for permission. It arrived like a verdict flooding the streets and stealing the color from the sky. The news channels glowed on every cafe screen, the same headline looping endlessly. Billionaire CEO Ethan Varela under fire again. Waitress at the center of controversy. Lena watched in disbelief as her face flashed across the television a blurred photo from the cafe. Her name spelled wrong, but her shame clear enough. Anonymous sources claim the relationship was romantic. The reporter said her tone sweet and cruel. Questions arise about power dynamics and hush money. The cup in Lena's hand slipped and shattered on the floor. The owner rushed out from the back, waving his phone. "What the hell did you do?" Lena, she tried to explain, but the words crumbled in her mouth. By the end of the day, she was told to take an indefinite break. It meant fired without paperwork. Outside cameras waited, like vultures' flashes, slicing through the rain. She ran until the city blurred her breath, ragged her heart, breaking under the weight of what she hadn't done. Across town, Ethan was in the middle of a board meeting, the air thick with accusation. "You've jeopardized our entire reputation," a director barked. "This isn't about ethics anymore, it's about survival." Ethan stayed silent, fingers steepled beneath his chin. The harassment audit's another said, the internal reform. "It looks like a publicity stunt now." Ethan's voice came low but sharp. "So you'd rather I cover it up like before?" The man flinched. "We're advising you to step down temporarily, until this settles." Ethan laughed softly without humor. "You're suspending me for doing what you failed to do." "We're protecting the company," the chairman said coldly. "And maybe protecting you from yourself." He stood knowing the decision had already been made. "Then protect what's left of your conscience," he said, and walked out. Outside, rain hit his face cold and cleansing. His phone buzzed non-stop calls from lawyers, PR agents, journalists, but he ignored them all until Hazel's name appeared. "It's Lena," she said. "They're tearing her apart online. She's hiding at her apartment. Please do something." He was already driving before the call ended. The roads glistened like mirrors, every red light a heartbeat of guilt. When he reached her building, she was sitting on the floor of the hallway. Her knees pulled to her chest, soaked and trembling. The door behind her was half open, a crowd of reporters still shouting questions from the street below. "Is it true, Miss Carter? Were you paid to stay silent? Did he buy your love?" Ethan knelt in front of her, blocking the view. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you out of here." She looked up, her eyes red. "You shouldn't be here. It'll make it worse." "It's already worse," he said. "Let me help." She hesitated only a second before taking his hand. They slipped out through the back stairwell, emerging into an alley lit by flickering signs and the smell of rain-soaked asphalt. He opened the passenger door of his car. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere quiet," he said. The drive was silent except for the wipers cutting through the rain. She stared out the window, watching the city melt into streaks of gray. Finally, she spoke. "They think I did something wrong." "You didn't," he said. "They just need someone to crucify." "And what about you?" she asked bitterly. "Aren't you tired of saving people who ruin your life?" He looked at her, then eyes tired but unwavering. "You didn't ruin my life, Lena. You reminded me I still have one." The car stopped outside a small beach house, south of the city, hidden from the road by palm trees and mist. He led her inside, handed her a towel. The house smelled of cedar and rain. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. "No one knows about this place." She hesitated at the doorway. "Why are you doing this?" He met her gaze. "Because I couldn't protect my sister when she needed me most. I won't make that mistake again." Her breath caught. "You had a sister." He nodded, staring at the storm outside. Her name was Isabel. She worked at one of our hotels. When she reported her supervisor, they called her a liar. I didn't believe her soon enough. 2 months later, she was gone. Silence filled the space between them, heavier than thunder. Lena stepped closer, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. Don't be," he said. "Just live. That'll be enough." The power flickered, plunging them into dim candlelight. She stood near him, the glow painting their faces in gold and shadow. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "we let the storm pass." Outside, waves crashed against the rocks, a rhythm older than their pain. Inside, the distance between them felt smaller than ever, but still dangerous. She could feel the heat from his body, the pulse of restraint in the air. He turned away first, his voice soft. "You should get some rest." She nodded, though sleep would not come. Later that night, she stepped onto the porch wrapped in his oversized sweater, watching the rain ease into mist. Ethan joined her quietly, standing just close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder. "You don't have to stay," she said. "You've done enough." "I'm not leaving," he said simply. "Not until you're safe." She looked at him, then really looked at the exhaustion beneath his calm, at the storm he carried behind his eyes. "You can't save everyone," she whispered. "Maybe," he said. "But I can try one more time." The wind lifted her hair, brushing it against his arm. For a second, they didn't move. It wasn't romance yet, not fully, just two broken people, standing in the wreckage of their own worlds, finding warmth in each other's silence. Inside the storm, outside, faded into the one within, steady and slow, refusing to end, but somehow softer than before. 3 months slipped by, like fog rolling over, the Pacific soft but merciless, blurring everything that came before. The scandal had burned itself out in the endless scroll of social media, replaced by newer tragedies, fresher gossip. Lena had vanished from Los Angeles trading noise for quiet in a small coastal town near Santa Barbara. She rented a studio above a flower shop where salt air drifted through the windows and gulls cried like ghosts of things forgiven. She spent her days painting and her nights listening to the sea, trying to remember who she was before the world decided her story for her. Her hair was longer now, sun-lightened at the edges, her skin carrying the peace that comes only after too much pain. Sometimes she still dreamed of Ethan, though she hated herself for it. In the dreams, he was always standing in the rain, saying nothing, letting her walk away. She would wake with the taste of salt on her lips, not sure if it came from tears or sea air. One afternoon, she walked to the local gallery where her landlord's daughter worked. "You should submit something," the girl insisted, flipping through Lena's sketchbook. "These are different. Honest." Lena almost refused, but the girl persisted, so she chose one painting. It was called "The Man Who Watched," a figure half hidden in shadow, his face caught between regret and light. She didn't tell anyone who it was. When the exhibition opened, the small gallery, filled with the sound of soft music and the clinking of wine glasses, tourists wandered in and out, murmuring polite compliments. Lena stayed near the back, unsure if she wanted anyone to see her work. Then the room grew quieter. A presence had entered, subtle, heavy, familiar. She didn't need to look up to know. Ethan stood near the doorway, wearing a dark coat rain still glistening on his hair. He looked older somehow, as if the months had carved something out of him. He didn't approach right away. Instead, he moved slowly through the gallery until he stopped in front of her painting. His breath left him in a long, silent exhale. The man in the painting stared back at him with his own eyes. Hazel appeared beside Lena, startling her. "I didn't think you'd actually show it," she whispered. "He found it anyway." Lena's throat tightened. "He shouldn't have come." "Maybe he needed to," Hazel said softly. "And maybe you did too." She walked away, leaving Lena frozen in place. Ethan finally turned and saw her. For a moment, neither moved. The noise of the room faded until it was only them two people who had spent months pretending they didn't miss what they'd lost. He walked toward her, each step measured, cautious, like approaching a wild animal. "You're hard to find," he said quietly. "Maybe that's the point," she replied. "You look—" He stopped, searching for a word that wasn't fragile. "Peaceful." "I had to be," she said. "There wasn't anyone left to fight for me." "That's not true," he said. "You just stopped letting me try." She looked away. "I didn't know what to believe." "You didn't trust me," he said. And it wasn't an accusation, just a truth laid bare. "Would you have?" she asked. "After everything the world said about you?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "Probably not." The honesty broke something inside her. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I saw you on the news again. They said you resigned?" "I did," he said. "It was the only way to keep the board from burying the reforms." "So you gave it all up," she said. "For what?" "For something that felt more like living," he said softly. "For this." He gestured to the painting on the wall. "For the reminder that even when I was hated, someone still saw me." Tears stung her eyes. "I painted you because I thought I'd never see you again. And yet, here I am," he said. The tension between them was delicate, a bridge rebuilt plank by plank. He stepped closer until they were standing inches apart. "Hazel told me about your mother," she said quietly. "You helped her with the hospital bills. You saved her cafe." His expression flickered with guilt. "I didn't want you to know." "Why?" "Because I didn't do it to make you forgive me," he said. "I did it because you deserved a life untouched by what men like me break." She swallowed hard. "You never broke me, Ethan." "No," he said, "but I walked away when you needed someone to stay." She looked up at him, then eyes glistening. "Maybe that was the only way I could learn to stand." A slow smile curved his lips. "Then maybe we both did what we had to." The gallery lights dimmed slightly as the evening wore on. He turned toward the painting one last time. "You know," he said softly, "for a man who watched, he looks like someone still waiting." She followed his gaze. "Maybe he is." Their hands brushed again, the same accidental spark as before. But this time neither pulled away. "Lena," he whispered, and her name sounded like a prayer he hadn't meant to say out loud. "I didn't come here to ask for anything," he continued. "I just needed to see you doing what you love. That's enough." "It isn't," she said, barely breathing. "It never was." The space between them vanished. She stepped into his arms, not for comfort, but for recognition. They stood like that, still and quiet, while outside the ocean sang against the shore. In that silence, the distance between kindness and love finally disappeared. The morning after the gallery felt lighter than any she had known in years, but peace never lasted long for people like them. The world always found a way to reopen old wounds. News broke again, this time not about scandal, but about defiance. Miles Dean, the former manager, had filed a lawsuit against Varela Holdings claiming false imprisonment and defamation. He was seeking millions backed by a lawyer, hungry for headlines. Lena saw the story on her phone as she sipped coffee, her stomach turning cold. By noon, reporters were calling the gallery, asking for statements about her connection to Ethan Varela, the disgraced CEO turned whistleblower. By evening, cameras camped outside her studio. Hazel called in a panic. "He's going to need you this time," she said. "The trial's in 2 weeks. They'll try to make it about you again." "I can't," Lena whispered. "I barely survived the first time." "Then maybe it's time to stop surviving and start fighting," Hazel said. That night, Lena sat by the ocean, the sound of waves reminding her of his voice, calm even in chaos. She thought of everything he had risked: his company, his reputation, his peace. She thought of the way he looked at her painting, as if it was proof he was still human. The next morning, she boarded a train back to Los Angeles. When Ethan saw her walk into his office unannounced, the look on his face was somewhere between disbelief and gratitude. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "Neither should you," she replied. "But here we are." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made the air between them warmer. "They'll put you on the stand," he warned. "They'll twist every word." "Then I'll speak carefully," she said. "But I won't be silent again." His voice caught. "You don't owe anyone your pain. I owe the truth to myself," she said. The courtroom was cold and sterile, the kind of place where truth was treated like currency bought, traded, negotiated. Miles sat across from them, smug in his tailored suit, playing the victim with theatrical precision. The prosecutor tore into him first, but his lawyer countered with venom. "My client," he said to the jury, "was publicly humiliated based on unverified claims and doctored footage provided by a man with a personal vendetta." He gestured toward Ethan, a billionaire desperate for redemption. Ethan remained still, his expression unreadable, but Lena could see the muscle in his jaw tighten. Then it was her turn. She took the stand, the world narrowing to the microphone in front of her and the rows of faces waiting to judge. "Miss Carter," the opposing lawyer began, "you had a relationship with Mr. Varela, didn't you?" "No," she said calmly. "I had a connection with a man who believed victims when no one else did." "So you're saying you were never involved romantically?" "I'm saying," she replied, "that love isn't always romantic. Sometimes it's just someone standing up when everyone else sits down." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The lawyer pressed harder, showing blurred photos from months ago. Her walking beside Ethan, their shoulders almost touching. "Looks intimate to me," he said. "Do you deny feelings were involved?" Lena looked directly at him. "Feelings were involved," she said. "Mine were fear. His were guilt. Both are very human." The room went silent. The judge motioned for the next piece of evidence. Ethan's video played on the screen, the footage from that night at the Velvet Hour, the one that had started everything. The grainy image showed Miles grabbing her wrist, her flinch, her voice breaking. The courtroom watched in collective stillness as Ethan's voice echoed faintly in the background. "Open it." The video ended. When the lights came back on, Miles's smirk had vanished. Lena exhaled slowly, tears she hadn't planned on falling. Ethan didn't look at her, afraid that one glance would undo the composure he'd built. The verdict came 3 days later. Miles Dean was found guilty of assault and defamation. His lawsuit was dismissed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like locusts, microphones flashing. Ethan stood beside Lena as flashes went off their silence, saying more than any statement could. When one reporter shouted, "Miss Carter, how does it feel to be vindicated?" she paused, then said, "Justice feels quiet, like peace after rain." The quote spread like wildfire. Social media shifted again, the narrative changing admiration, replacing doubt. By the time they reached his car, the adrenaline had faded, leaving only exhaustion. "You did it," Ethan said. "No," she said softly. "We did it." He shook his head. "You saved me, Lena. Again. You keep saying that." She replied, smiling faintly. "Maybe it's time you start saving yourself." He looked at her, then sunlight catching the edge of her hair, and for the first time since he'd stepped down, he felt like he could breathe. A week later, Varela Holdings released a public statement announcing a new foundation under Lena's name, the Carter Initiative, dedicated to workplace safety and survivor support. She protested, but he insisted. "It's your story," he said. "Let it heal others." She visited the office once more before leaving the city again. The building felt different now, stripped of arrogance, humming with quiet reform. As she stepped into his office, he looked up from his desk. "You're leaving again," he said. "For a while," she said. "The ocean's calling." He smiled. "I hope it tells you good things." She hesitated, then said, "You could come visit sometime." His eyes softened. "Careful, Lena. I might never leave." She laughed quietly. Maybe that's the point. He walked her to the elevator, the same calm in his stride, but something deeper in his eyes, something that looked like belonging. As the doors closed, he whispered, "Thank you for coming back." She met his gaze one last time. "I didn't come back for you," she said. "I came back for the truth. You just happened to be part of it." When the elevator doors shut, he stood there for a long while, the hum of the city below fading into something almost sacred. The reckoning was over. What remained was everything they hadn't said yet, waiting quietly for the right moment to be spoken. The sky opened up, as if the city itself needed to wash away what it had witnessed. By the time Ethan left the courthouse, rain was falling in thick silver sheets, turning sidewalks into mirrors of blurred neon. He didn't wait for the driver. He walked suit-drenched tie, loosened every step heavy but certain. Lena was ahead of him, her figure small, beneath a black umbrella that did little to fight the storm. When she reached the corner, she stopped, lowered it, and let the rain soak through her hair. She wanted to feel something real cold, wet, undeniable. "Lena," his voice called behind her low and ragged, barely audible over the thunder. She turned slowly, her breath fogging in the chill. He looked ruined and beautiful, a man stripped of everything but truth. "You don't have to chase me," she said. "It's over." "No," he said, walking closer, rain running down his face. "The lies are over, not us." She almost laughed. "Us, we never even had a chance to begin." "We did," he said. "The night I watched you walk out of that bar, I knew. I just didn't have the courage to stay." His words trembled between confession and plea. She shook her head, eyes bright with anger and hurt. "You think courage is showing up when the cameras are gone. Courage was standing there when they pointed at me. And I failed you," he said. "I know." She started to walk away, but he stepped into her path, rainwater splashing around their shoes. "You taught me something I couldn't learn in boardrooms or courtrooms," he said. "That saving someone isn't love, but watching them rise, that is." She froze. The words hit deep, not because they were poetic, but because they were true. Her voice softened. Then why can't you let me rise without you? Because you don't have to rise alone, he whispered. You never did. The streetlight above flickered, and for a moment the world narrowed to the rhythm of the rain, the distance of a single breath. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the billionaire, not the savior, but the man who had watched her break and never once looked away. You make everything harder, she said softly. So do you, he replied, his lips curling into a small broken smile. That's how I know it's real. The anger drained from her shoulders, replaced by something rawer, older than fear, something like longing. She reached up and touched his collar, brushing away the rain that refused to stop falling. His breath caught as her fingers lingered against his neck. I don't want to hate you anymore, she said. Then don't, he murmured. Her thumb traced the line of his jaw, and for the first time since that night in the restroom, he didn't flinch from her touch. Say it, he whispered. Say what you're thinking. Her voice broke. I don't know how to love someone I don't trust yet. Then start with honesty, he said. Start with this. And before she could answer, he kissed her. Not the desperate kind of kiss born from fear, but the slow, searching kind that feels like a promise still being written. The world disappeared into the rain. Every drop that hit their skin felt like a vow. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. I don't want forgiveness, he said. I just want to deserve the way you look at me. Her eyes shimmered. Then stop trying to save me, Ethan. Just stand with me. Always, he said. Thunder rolled above, but it sounded like applause from a sky that had finally decided to bless them. They stayed like that two soaked silhouettes beneath the downpour, their breaths sinking with the rhythm of the storm. When they finally stepped back, both were laughing through tears. We must look insane, she said. Then let's be insane together, he replied. A cab splashed past the driver, honking as if impatient with the universe. They ignored it. He took her hand fingers, interlocking naturally, like two puzzle pieces that had been waiting years to meet. Come with me, he said. There's something I want to show you. They walked through the rain to a quiet part of the city where the lights dimmed and the noise softened. He led her to a construction site, an old building wrapped in scaffolding and tarps. What is this? She asked. The New Velvet Hour, he said. Different name, different purpose. It'll be a foundation for survivors, a place for voices like yours. She looked up at the half-finished sign above the doorway, Second Chance. Her lips parted in awe. You built this, we're building it, he said. It's not just mine anymore. She turned to him, emotion choking her voice. You turned pain into something beautiful. No, he said softly. You did. They stood in silence, the kind that doesn't demand words. Finally, she said, you should come inside before you catch a cold. Only if you're coming too, he said. She smiled that soft, quiet smile that always undid him. They stepped into the unfinished building. The lights were dim, the air filled with the scent of wood and rain. She walked slowly, running her fingers along the bar counter, newly installed. It's strange, she said. The last time I stood behind a bar, my whole life changed. Then maybe it can change again, he said. She turned toward him, eyes shining. You really believe in second chances, don't you? I do, he said. Because you gave me one. Her breath caught as he stepped closer. The sound of rain softened against the roof. What happens next? She asked. Whatever we make of it, he said. She nodded, and when he kissed her again, it wasn't a question this time. It was an answer. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper, the city lights reflecting on the wet pavement. like stars fallen to earth. In that quiet, something inside both of them finally exhaled. The world had judged them, broken them, and left them standing. And still they chose love not as redemption, but as resistance. 1 year later, Los Angeles looked softer, as if time itself had chosen to forgive. The bar stood quietly at the corner of Melrose and Fifth, its sign glowing warm against the night second chance. No paparazzi waited outside, no whispers lingered on the street. Inside, soft jazz played from a vintage record player, the air smelling faintly of citrus and rain. Lena wiped down the counter, her hair tied back loosely. The sleeves of her linen shirt rolled past her elbows. The once shy waitress now moved with quiet certainty, her laughter easy, her eyes at peace. Across the room, a group of young women sat together, their faces marked by the gentle relief of being believed. A small plaque on the wall read, "For those who found courage when silence was easier." At one of the tables, Ethan sat watching her, his expression a blend of pride and something deeper, quieter belonging. He no longer wore suits every day. His shirt sleeves were rolled up his hair, still damp from the drizzle outside. He'd spent the last year rebuilding not his empire, but his purpose. The Varela Trust now funded dozens of survivor programs across the state. But this bar, this small glowing space, was where his heart lived. Lena walked over, setting a glass of lemon water in front of him. "You've been staring again," she teased. "Old habit," he said. "Can't help it when the view keeps changing." She smirked, wiping her hands on a towel. "Flattery still won't get you free drinks. Good thing I already paid," he said, sliding a folded check across the counter. She opened it and froze. "Ethan, this is for too much." "It's not charity," he said. "It's investment. You're expanding next month, right?" She sighed, shaking her head. "You never stop, do you?" "Not when it comes to you," he said. Their eyes met, and for a moment the noise around them faded. The bartender adjusted the lights, the record crackled softly, and rain began again, outside, gentle this time, like memory. Lena poured him coffee, sitting opposite the counter. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The boardrooms, the power." He thought for a long moment, swirling his cup. "Power without peace isn't power at all," he said. "It's punishment." She smiled faintly. "You sound like a poet." "Only when I'm sitting across from a muse," he replied. She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks flushed anyway. The door opened then, and Hazel stepped in, shaking off an umbrella. "Full house tonight," she said, grinning. "You two should be proud." "We are," Lena said. "Just don't tell him or he'll turn it into another press release." "I heard that," Ethan muttered. Hazel laughed. "I'm just glad you both learned how to be happy without headlines." "We're learning," Lena said softly. When Hazel walked away to greet guests, Ethan leaned closer. "You ever think about that first night?" She paused, the rag stilling in her hand. "Every time it rains." "Do you regret any of it?" he asked. She looked at him, the amber light catching her eyes. "Not a single thing," she said. "Even the pain. Especially the pain. It's what made us real." He reached across the counter, his fingers brushing hers. "Then let's stay real," he said. "No masks, no more, saving just being." She nodded, her smile slow and tender. "I like the sound of that." He stood then, moving behind the counter to help her clean up. They worked side by side, the rhythm of small domestic movements, feeling sacred. 2 glasses here, a rag folded there, laughter threading quietly between them. Outside, a group of college students ran past under umbrellas, their laughter echoing through puddles. Life was ordinary again, and somehow extraordinary because of it. When the last patron left and Hazel locked the door, Lena dimmed the lights until only the soft glow above the bar remained. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching her move. "Justice is loud," he said after a moment. She turned, drying her hands. "What justice?" he repeated. "It's loud, messy, impossible to ignore. But love." He paused, stepping closer, until she could feel the warmth of him. "Love is quiet." She tilted her head. "Then let's keep it that way." He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his chest, as the rain tapped gently on the windows. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her not as a savior, but as a man finally at peace. The world outside kept spinning headlines, changing storms, returning and fading again. But in that small corner of the city, time seemed to stop. They had built something from ruin, not perfect, not pure, but real. And maybe that was all the redemption they'd ever need. In the distance, the record ended with a soft crackle, and silence filled the bar like a blessing. If you believe love can heal what power once broke, drop a heart in the comments and let the quiet speak for itself. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that love can bloom even in the wreckage left by power and silence, take a moment right now and let your heart speak. Drop a heart in the comments if you believe that redemption isn't found in grand gestures, but in quiet ones in the hand that stays when the world walks away. Maybe you've known someone like Ethan, a person trying to make things right after doing things wrong. Or maybe you've been someone like Lena Strong on the outside, but trembling inside, searching for a reason to keep believing in good people. If you saw yourself in her story, know this: you are not alone. The storms we go through don't break us, they reveal us. They strip away the noise, the fear, the image. We think the world wants until all that's left is truth. And truth, when met with love, becomes healing. So if you've ever been told you're too soft, too emotional, too kind, remember that softness is how light enters. And if you've ever been made to feel small by those with power, remember that even empires crumble before an honest heart. Comment below with the moment that hit you hardest. Was it when Ethan said that saving someone isn't love, but watching them rise is? Or when Lena decided that the only justice that matters is peace? Tell us where you're watching from, because somewhere across oceans, there's another person who's been through what you've been through, and your words might help them breathe a little easier tonight. Subscribe if you want more stories that don't just entertain, but heal, that remind us what love looks like when it's stripped of perfection. Every week we bring you new tales of redemption, kindness, and connection. Because somewhere in this chaotic world, someone still believes that decency wins. Share this story with someone who needs hope, someone who's lost faith in love or justice. Let them see that not every powerful man is cruel, and not every quiet woman is weak. Sometimes they just needed to find each other at the right time in the right storm to remember who they really are. And if you believe that the truest form of love isn't loud, isn't perfect, but is patient and kind, type "I believe" in the comments. Let's fill this space with light, with hearts, with proof that empathy still matters. Because maybe that's the point of every story we tell here, not to escape the world, but to make it a little softer for someone else. So don't scroll just yet. Take a breath, feel the quiet, then leave your mark below, and let's keep building this place where love doesn't have to shout to be heard.